بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So before the break, we come across a number of hadiths relating to the issue of al-masih al-jabair, wiping over the casts and the bandages. But these hadith are unreliable. Okay? I meant to go through this discussion with you for a number of reasons, but mainly I want you to understand that this theme was not presented to you, was not brought to you with scholars who were sleeping at night and did very little work. These scholars, they worked very, very hard. They had to sift through a hadith like this. They had to know the biography of every. They had to sift through a hadith like this. They had to know the biography of every individual who narrated any single hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. Some of them would say that I know the narrators more than I know my own family. You know the narrators, the people who narrate the hadith. They said I know everything about them, so much so that I can say that I know them more than I know my own family. For them to be able to bring the Islamic knowledge ready and easy for you to digest. For example, Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi alayhi, he has a statement in this context. He says, concerning the last hadith, he said, لو عرفت إسناده بالصحة لقلت به. This hadith concerning Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu when he broke his arm. He said, if I knew any chain of narrators that are reliable for this hadith, I would have taken it. I would have gave my fatwa based on it. I would have relied on it. But then he says, وَهَذَا مِمَّا أَسْتَخِيرُ اللَّهَ فِيهِ. He says this issue, the issue of wiping over the jabira, is something for which I do istikhara. Meaning, these are the kind of issues that have no definitive, decisive text from the Quran or the Sunnah. So the ulama, they have to apply their mind into it, they have to use analogy, they have to use their best judgment to arrive at a conclusion. So this is another benefit that we can benefit from here. This statement, the statement where he says that I will do istikhara for certain issues, what he meant by that is there are issues that are unclear in terms of, or there is no hadith, there is no text, verse or hadith about them, and therefore it will be a matter of ijtihad. Ijtihad, meaning applying one's mind until they arrive at the conclusion. One of the benefits we get from this is, for one, to understand that not everything that you have learned about Islam from your scholars is all decisive and clear and cut clear about it. You need to understand that there are issues in which debate is acceptable, and there is room for debate among scholars. So you should never have the attitude that what I know is correct and what anybody else knows is incorrect. That is not the case. And in fact, this is one of the reasons why I wanted us to delve a little bit in the depth of this knowledge, because the more you know, the more knowledge should make you humble. And the little you know, the more you think that you've got it all sorted out and all figured out. So knowledge has so many benefits, but one of the most important benefits of knowledge is to cause the person to become humble. You know, allowing people to say whatever they believe, allowing people to speak their mind, allowing people to have different opinion with them, and they will still have respect and love and compassion towards them. They will not become judgmental. That is one of the benefits of having knowledge. Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi alayhi, he says this statement, this is something that I would do istikhara for 14 times in only one of his books, about 14 different issues. Imam al-Bayhaqi says, there is no hadith that is reliable about wiping over the cast and the bandages. And the only thing that we have in reliable chain of narrators is concerning Abdullah ibn Umar. Abdullah ibn Umar, radiallahu anhu. That he one time, أنه توضأ وكفه معصوبة فمسح عليها وعلى العصائب وغسل ما سوى ذلك. That one day, he had a cut in his hand, so he had bandages around his hand. His mawla, his servant, he says that he took wudu and he wiped over the part that was covered with bandages. Right? So this Imam al-Bayhaqi, he said this is the only narration concerning wiping over the bandages that is reliable. Not from the Prophet ﷺ, but from the Sahaba, the practice of the Sahaba. And the other thing we have about this is opinions of fuqaha, scholars, jurists of Islam. We have their opinion. Now, as you would imagine, there will be a number of opinions concerning the rulings of wiping over the jabira, or wiping over the cast and the bandages. Are you ready to list them? The opinions are concerning the rulings of wiping over the bandages. How did the ulama differ concerning that? Opinion number one is that wiping over the casts and the bandages is impermissible. Nothing to do with Islam. Can anybody understand why this would be the case? Why would anybody say something like this? There is no text. Right? If there is no text, then how could we legislate something without text? Amongst the ulama who said this, Imam Ibn Hazm, rahmatullahi alayhi, he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah will not burden a soul except with that which is within its capacity. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in the hadith, إذا أمرتكم بأمر فأتوا منه ما استطعتكم. If I give you any commandment, then engage in it in the best of your abilities. Right? You are only required to do things according to your ability, according to your capacity. Right? And now we understand from this that if you are unable to fulfill anything, then it drops because you are unable to fulfill it. We have two texts concerning this, right? The ayah and the hadith. So he said, if a person is unable to wash their hands, let's say for example a hand is broken and they have a cast over it. So this person is able or unable to wash their hands? Unable. So based on this text, is he required to wash the hands anymore? He is not. No, he is no longer required to wash over the bandages. He is not required to substitute the washing with something else, because we don't have any other text that says you should substitute the washing with something else. And because there is no hadith, then all we could say for this person is just don't wash it. If you have bandages, don't wash it, and you don't have to wipe it. So that's the first opinion. Right?
So that means take wudu, but don't wash the broken arm or that.
Yeah, just take wudu, but if you have a broken arm that has bandages or cast over it, the first opinion says just ignore it completely. Don't wash it and don't wipe on it. What did Ibn Hazm, one of the scholars who said this, say about Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, the Sahabi Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu? He was recorded in an authentic chain of narrators to have said something like this. Right? So they asked him, what do you say about him? He said, this is one of the decisions, the personal choices, the personal decisions of a Sahabi. Right? And that is not a way of legislating. We don't take legislations from the decisions of the Sahaba themselves. Right? And he said in particular about Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he said this man, this Sahabi, was so eager to fulfill all his ibadat that he used to actually put the water inside of his eyes. He used to wash the inside of his eyes. Is that a requirement in Islam?
No.
Is it legislated in Islam? No, not at all. Right? So we say that this is Ibn Umar. If we say that anything the Sahabi does, then we will do something like this. So anything that doesn't have any basis from the Quran and Sunnah, we will not be concerned about the actions of the Sahabi. This is how he answered about Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. The second opinion, they said that he should do tayammum. He should do tayammum, meaning no wiping over the bandages, but he should do tayammum. And the analogy is, if a person is unable to wash one hand, right, this means his tahara will be missing. Some part of his Taharah will be missing. And Taharah is one whole. You cannot partition it. You cannot have it in portions and say this part is there and that part is not there. Since you cannot partition it, then leave the whole wudu and take tayammum. Do you understand the analogy? Are you with me? Anybody's lost?
Wait, could you say that second point?
The second opinion here is that you should not wipe over the bandages, but instead of that you should do tayammum.
No wudu.
No wudu, no wiping, but tayammum instead.
Yeah. But the first one you have to do wudu, but just not wipe over the...
Just ignore it. The first opinion was to just ignore that part that has the bandage over it. The second opinion now is saying no, forget about wudu altogether. Forget about ghusl, just take tayammum. Dry ablution. Number 3, and that's the strongest opinion, that it is permissible, it is legislated for a person who cannot wash a body part that is part of the wudu area due to bandages or cast. It is permissible for this person to wipe over the bandages or the cast. It is permissible. What's their evidence? Can anybody guess? No, not Ibn Umar. Because remember we said that that cannot be a source of legislation. We need to have text.
Hadith of Ali because it's weak also.
Yeah, we can't say any of the 2 hadith that we narrated. They are weak. Yes.
There's a third one that you said it was reliable.
No, the one that's reliable is from Ibn Umar himself. The way he practiced, things that he did for himself. He didn't say the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did.
Oh.
Right?
The ayah that you mentioned.
No.
Huh?
The ayah you mentioned before.
No. This ayah was used for the first opinion. Yes.
Is it like the wiping of the sock?
Yes. Yeah. The wiping of the sock. So they used analogy, meaning they drew parallel between 2 similar cases. And they say, we have in Islam the case whereby if the feet is covered, we wipe over the feet. And this is actually similar to when the hand or a broken body part is covered with bandages. It's similar to that. So we will apply the same ruling to it. This is called analogy. Or in the Arabic, the word for it is qiyas. Qiyas. And this is one of the ways of legislation in Islam. In Islam, you will have evidence from the Quran, evidence from the Sunnah, and then if you have nothing from that, and you have a situation that did not have direct evidence to it from the Quran and the Sunnah, they would use analogy. They will say there's no difference between 2 similar cases, and therefore we will apply the rulings for which the case that we have an evidence for, we will apply it to that case that we have no evidence for. Right? For example, in Surah Al-Nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about the punishment for those who falsely accuse women in their honor, accusing them of zina. And the ayah stated the punishment for those. Now the ayah explicitly said, وَالَّذِينَ يَرْمُونَ الْمُحْصَنَاتِ, meaning those who will throw false accusations at those chaste women. Now, what about the person that throws false accusations against honorable men? The ayah is speaking about what? Women. Now, what is the ruling concerning men who are being accused falsely? Is it the same ruling? Yeah. How do we find evidence to that? They say qiyas, they say analogy. Because what's the difference between the honor of a man and an honor of a lady? Nothing. An honor is an honor. So therefore, somebody who falsely accuses a man is exactly like a person that falsely accuses a woman. Now, even though we don't have direct text that speaks about falsely accusing a man, but we use analogy. We say the case is similar, so therefore we will apply the same ruling. What is this called in Islam? Qiyas. Right? And also, just for you to appreciate as well, that there are some scholars who were of the opinion that they never use qiyas. They will never use qiyas. Quran and Sunnah only, they say. Obviously, this is not a valid opinion. Right? As is one of the legitimate sources for deducing Islamic knowledge from. So the ulama, they say, now we have in our case here, when the feet is covered with the socks, Islam legislated for us to wipe over the feet. So now we have a situation where we have a body part covered with bandages or cast due to necessity, and therefore it should be given the same ruling. In fact, it is more deserving of that concession. Because a person who is wiping over the socks, are they desperate for it? No. Is there like a necessity for it? Or is it out of ease? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted this to be a way of concession for people. Right? Just to make things easy for people. But there is no harm. Is there any harm that's going to happen to a person when they don't wipe over the socks, when they actually, there's no harm. But in this case, there is harm. If a person, for example, has wounds or has just had a surgery, if you tell them you have to wash it, there will be harm coming to this person. Right? So therefore, who is more deserving of this concession? The jabira, the cast and the bandage. So the ulama, they say, we will apply the same ruling to it based on masih. So now, they say the reason why wiping over the jabira or wiping over the cast and the bandages is permissible is because there is harm. There is harm and that body part is concealed. So that's the reason. Now based on that, we will say this will become applicable to cast, the hard, the rock side, the jabira itself. And is it applicable to bandages? It's applicable. Is it applicable to plasters? Yeah, the same thing applies. If the same rule applies, anything that falls under that category is applicable to it. Do you see what I meant when I said this is applicable to our lives? How often do you have plasters in your fingers, in your foot, or whatever? Quite often. Now, what do you do in that situation? Now, this is what we're talking about here now. Huh? Yes. So anything that covers the body part, which is supposed to be washed during wudu, if you do cover it due to a necessity, and if washing it with water will cause you to have harm. And while I'm at it here, let me tell you what is the harm we're talking about here. For example, the ulama, they say إذا خشيت تلف العضو. For example, if you fear that if you used the water, for example, your wound will become rotten and you will have infection and you will have to have your finger amputated, for example. Right? But is that the only thing? What if a person says, I don't fear from my finger to be amputated, but there is severe pain. Is this good enough? Is it good enough? Right? What if a person says, I don't have any severe pain, but this cut in my finger, the more it's exposed to water, the longer it takes to heal. Right? Is this good enough excuse?
Yeah.
Yes. So even if water delays the recovery, that is also good enough harm for you to be able to wipe over it. Right? Now, do you understand what I meant by the ease of the deen? And those who don't know this, they feel that they have to take the plaster out and they have to wash it, and they put themselves into so much hardship that Islam never legislated. Islam came with ease. Their problem is their lack of knowledge. Okay? Now, is there any conditions to make wiping over the bandages or the cast permissible? Yes. We said number one. Write down. What are the conditions that makes wiping over the bandages or the cast permissible? Number one is that one has to fear harm for themselves if they use water. Also, the second condition, if one fears if they wipe directly on the wound itself, right, there will also be harm. Not washing. Like we said, that we know now, the first condition, if you know that washing will bring harm. Second thing is, what about if you don't fear, if you're not going to do the washing but with water, but you are going to wipe the wound itself? Can you wipe the wound itself? If that is possible, you cannot wipe over bandages. Do you understand? So if we imagine that there is a swelling in one's wrist, for example. Swelling, there is no cut, there's nothing like that. Right? And with the swelling, there is no harm in, for example, wiping over the swelling itself. So you don't have to do bandage over it and wipe over the bandages. So you should only wipe over the bandages if wiping over the wound itself is going to be harmful. So we have two stages now here. You ask yourself, is washing the body part harmful? If the answer is yes, you move on. You ask yourself the second question, can I wipe over the wound itself, not on the dressing? Is it possible for me to wipe on the wound? If the answer is yes, then you cannot wipe over the dressing. You should wipe over the wound itself. Right? If the answer is no, I cannot wipe over the wound, it's too harmful, too dangerous for me, then the third condition will be that the bandages are only according to your need. You don't overdo it and start to wrap the whole arm when all you need is just the wrist, you know? So you do the bandages only around the area that is impacted with the damage. That's the third condition, right? And then you can wipe. I'm going to say it one more time. The conditions are as follows. One, you should know that there will be harm if you wash it with water. Right? Before you wash over the dressing, you should ask yourself, can you wipe over the wound itself? If the answer is yes, then you cannot wipe over the dressing. You have to go directly on the skin itself and wipe. You don't have to wash, but wipe. Right? If both washing and wiping on the wound is going to become harmful to you, then in that case you can actually wipe over the dressing itself. Right? Now, anybody has questions about this? Right. Are there conditions that are required for wiping over the socks that are not required for wiping over the bandages? Yes?
Is it that before, with socks you need to have like wudu before you put them on?
Yes.
And with the plaster you don't need?
You don't need to. Very good. Well done. So one of the differences is you don't have to have wudu because it happens in a matter of situations or emergency and you don't have choice on the matter. So we can't say, take the cast off, take wudu and put it on. We can't say that. So that condition was only applicable to wiping over the socks and it's not applicable to the jabira. Very good. Anything else? Yes?
That 24-hour period.
Yes. The sanctions on the limitation on how long you can wipe, that is also not applicable to wiping over the cast and the bandages. You can wipe over it for as long as you have it. Obviously, as long as you have it only for as much as you need, right? Then you can wipe on it. Yes, Akhi?
By the way, for that after 24-hour period is done for the socks, how long do you have to not wear socks until you can wear socks again?
Okay, hold on to that question. Let me not distract everybody on this. Just hold on to it. So, what are the conditions that are required from wiping over the socks, but not required from wiping over the cast and the bandages? We said you're not required to have wudu, and secondly, there is no restriction on how long you can wipe it for. What else? Yes.
What if there's no difference if you take off and put it back on, like the bandage?
Yeah.
Like with the socks, if you take it off, then no, but that comes at the time limit. That's fine.
Right. With the tayammum, with the wiping over the socks, can you wipe over the socks when you take a ghusl?
No.
No, you can't. That's another one of the differences. When it comes to using the bandages and the plasters and the casts and the like, even when you do ghusl, you still can use it. You can still wipe over the bandages. Right? Number 4, in terms of the differences, you remember we said concerning the khuf, when it comes to wiping, you have to wipe the majority of the khuf. The majority of the khuf. Right? Meaning that you can't just touch it a little bit, you have to say, for example, up to 70% of it, 80% of it, you have to wipe the majority of it. You don't have to do the whole thing. When it comes to the jabira, wiping over the bandages, you have to do the entire thing. right? So if you have, let's say for example, a plaster, you can't just say, you can't just wipe it gently on top or whatever. You have to make sure that you cover the whole plaster with your wipe. You understand? And masih has to be on the entire plaster or on the entire cast. Gently, right? But you have to cover the whole thing. This is the opinion of the 4 schools of thoughts. Right? And the difference between the two, why is it that on wiping of the socks, if you do as far as you do the majority of it, it will suffice. But when it comes to the cast, you have to wipe over the whole thing. What's the difference? They say the ulama, because when it comes to the socks, it's a concession. It's rukhsa, right? But in the case of wiping over the cast, it's a replacement for wudu. It's a replacement for wudu. And therefore, if the wudu covers the whole part, right, then you have to cover the whole part of the bandages or the cast. Obviously, this also means if the bandages are not covering the whole arm. So for example, sometimes you have people who have broken arm, the cast will be including the elbow all the way up to the wrist or a little bit further up. But what's showing is the fingers, only the fingers will be washed. The part of the hand that is still visible, that has to be washed. It has to be washed. The one that can be wiped is only the one that has the bandage over it. How many times do you wipe? Just one time. And again, this is based on 4 schools of thought. Just one wipe. Timing of the wiping. When do you time the wiping? In the wudu, you wipe the part, the jabira or the bandage, when you get to the order of that part in the wudu. So for example, if you have bandage on the left hand, wait for it until you get to the part of it, and then you wipe it then. But with the ghusl, what do you do? Do you do the wiping first and then ghusl? Or do you do the ghusl first and then the wiping? Huh? Okay, the ulama, they say there is no preference. Just do whatever is easy for you. As long as ultimately you will have washed all the visible body part of yours, and the one that's under the bandage, you end up wiping it. Whether you do this one first or that one first, does not make a huge difference.
So for the wudu, you have to follow the orders.
In the order. You do it in the order. You wipe it in the right order. For the ghusl, you do it in whatever timing. Like, this is one tricky question. Pay attention to this one. And it's also a valid scenario that could occur to your life or to the life of people you know. Say, for example, let's talk about ghusl. You have somebody who had an operation or an accident, and they have like a cast, and there is wounds, there is operation, there is blood, and they need to have ghusl. They need to have ghusl. Now, we can tell them the same thing. Have ghusl on the rest of your body, but when it comes to the bandage itself, you can just simply wipe it with your hand, just wipe it. Right? But what if the person says, I fear that if I wash the body part that is near the cast, water will penetrate and it could cause complications to my bandages or my wounds. What should be the case here? So basically, ultimately, we're going to have a body part that is still open, but neither wiped nor washed. What should the person do? Yes, Ali?
I would put a plastic bag on it first and cover it, and then come back to it.
No, I'm talking about the wudu. The wudu, in terms of the wudu.
Oh.
What should the person do? Or the ghusl? Yes, sister? Tayammum. Very well done. Tayammum. Tayammum for that part that did not have ghusl or wipe. You cannot wipe it because it's open, right? And you cannot have ghusl because it will cause complications. So therefore, in replacement for that body part that cannot be washed or wiped, you have to do tayammum for it. So you still have ghusl. So you still have ghusl, and you will wipe over the cast, and on top of that you do tayammum. Tayammum is on behalf of that body part that did not receive neither. Is this point clear? Right? This could be also the situation with wudu. Right? When similar situation could happen where you cannot, you have a body part that cannot be either. Right? So, for example, if you have a wound that is uncovered, uncovered, that is open, right? You cannot wash it, and you cannot wipe over it. What do you do? Is it something that's likely to happen? Very, very possible scenario. What should you do then?
What was the
You have a wound in your body, on your arm, say, for example, and it's not covered for you to wipe over the bandage, and you cannot wipe over the wound itself, right? Because it will cause harm. So what should you do? How should you make wudu? The same thing applies. You take wudu in the rest of the body part that takes wudu, and for that body part that you could not take wudu for, you take tayammum. Is this clear? Anybody confused? Yes, sister.
Wait, because you know my mum once she cut her head here and she had to get it glued. So would she just do wudu as normal and then after that she'd do tayammum?
Yeah,
Okay.
good question. You see, this is that happens a lot. It's quite common. It happens a lot. You get cut, for example, you have a wound. Sometimes you have a plaster, sometimes you don't have a plaster. How should you tell? What should you do? Right?
Does the tayammum have to be in the order as well?
Huh?
Does the tayammum have to be in order as well? So if you're making wudu, you do tayammum because you can't even wipe over it.
It doesn't matter. You do either way.
Okay.
If you do tayammum first or wudu first, it doesn't matter. Right? So now we can summarize like this. If you have a wound, right? If this wound is open and you can wash it, what should you do? If you have a wound and you can wash it, it will not cause you harm. What's the ruling? You must wash it. Right? If you have a wound but you cannot wash it, you ask yourself, can I wipe it directly? If the answer is yes, you must wipe it. If the answer is no, I cannot wipe it directly and it's wrapped, then in that case, you wipe over the bandages. But what if it's not wrapped? If it's not covered?
Why?
Then, if it's not covered, the wound is there, you cannot wash it, you cannot wipe it. You take wudu as normal, and then only for that part, you do tayammum. Is this clear? طيب. The last question in this part here. What if a person takes wudu and wipes over the bandages, and then they recover? They become better, and they remove the bandages. Does that break their wudu, or they need to take another wudu? Is the question clear? Yeah. Let me say it one more time. What if a person takes wudu and then wash the body part that are visible, and the one that is covered with bandages and cast, they wipe over it, and then after that they recover and they remove the bandages? Now their wudu is still valid or not?
Still valid.
Huh?
Can we apply qiyas again? Like say, if you had wudu before you had the cup, before you put on the bandage, then you don't have to make wudu again. But if you didn't have wudu, then you would.
Yeah, I'm saying he had wudu.
Still.
No, before you put on the bandage.
Now remember we said that the ruling concerning bandages, you don't have to have wudu
Yeah,
before
yeah,
it. Yeah, that's the ruling. He didn't have wudu, but he had the bandages, but he wiped over it and took other wudu.
Then you have to make wudu again.
Still valid.
Huh? No. Remember we said what we said about removing the socks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Removing the socks, does it break the wudu?
No.
No. If you still have wudu, the mere removal of the socks does not break the wudu. Likewise with the jabira. If you remove the cast or the bandages, that in itself will not break your wudu. Right? Quickly, I will discuss a couple of matters before we conclude. The Prophet ﷺ also instructed people to wipe over something else. Anybody can guess? Yes? Over, not the head? Huh? No, the turban. If somebody is wearing a turban, can you wipe over the turban? Yes. Al-mas'h al-imama. It is a valid thing that was established in Quran and in the Sunnah and from the actions of the Salaf. Right? authentic narrations. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُسِكُمْ, wipe your heads. Right? And we said that is explained in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Remember what we said about when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَاغْسِلُوا أَرْجُلَكُمْ and إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ, wash your feet up to the ankles. We said this is what the verse said. But when we look at the actions of the Prophet ﷺ, his actions, they further explain and elaborate on the verse. So likewise, when we hear in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, wipe over your heads. And then when we look at the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, we find that if he is not wearing a turban, he will wipe his hair. And if he's wearing a turban, he will wipe over his turban, his imamah. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ, if he is not wearing anything, he will wipe on his head. If he's wearing an imamah, he will not remove the imamah, he will wipe over it. Right? This is recorded in so many ahadith, authentic ahadith, including, or one of the most famous of them, is the hadith of Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah radiyallahu anhu. He said that أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم توضأ فمسح بناصيته وعلى الإمامة وعلى الخفين. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم took wudu, the Sahabi says, he took wudu and he had a certain amount of hair visible in his forehead, his nasiyah. So he wiped over that, and then he wiped on the imamah, and then he wiped over the socks. This hadith is in Muslim. So we have so many other hadith from different Sahaba. We have the actions of the Sahaba themselves, authentically reporting that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu did wipe over the imamah. And it was so much the case that Umar Khattab radiyallahu anhu used to say, مَنْ لَمْ يُطَهِرْهُ الْمَسْحِ عَلَى الْإِمَامَةِ فَلَا طَهَّرَهُ اللَّهُ. One who is not convinced or contented with wiping over the imamah as a legitimate way of taking Taharah, then may he not be purified at all. Meaning that something that the Prophet ﷺ found contentment in doing was satisfactory for the Prophet ﷺ, why would one come later and say, oh no, it's not satisfactory for me, I will take the imam and wipe over it. So it's legitimate. Yes, a person can do that. You can remove the imamah and wipe over the hair, but you should know that it is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to wipe over the imamah. Especially when the imamah is difficult to remove. So the key here is the difficulty. Right? Yes.
Does that mean the sisters wearing that religion?
I'll come to that in a minute, inshallah. Right? So the ulama, they said, we have text now. We have text from the Quran, we have text from the Hadith, and we have from the actions of the Sahaba. Clear, authentic reports from the Sahaba saying that they did wipe over the imamah. Also, when we look at it, we'll find that the imamah is in fact more worthy of wiping than the socks. Right? Which of the two would you rather protect? The head or the feet? The head. And which is more difficult to put on, especially with the imamah of the past. They used to wrap it around the head, and then part of it will actually go around the face itself. So it will be like properly wrapped properly, and they will call it al-muhannaka. It comes under the hanak, under the jaws, right? So it's difficult. It's more difficult than wiping over the socks. So even logically, after we have learned the text from the Quran and the Sunnah and the actions of the Sahaba, even logic tells us that it is more worthy to wipe over the imamah than it is for the thing. However, one should know that it is also not required for you to wear the imamah whilst in a state of wudu. Like in the case of the khuf, you don't have to wear the imamah in a state of wudu. You could just put it on while you have no wudu, you put the imamah on, and when it comes to the time when you need to take wudu, you just wipe over it. Right? So that's one of the differences between wiping over the imamah and wiping over the khuf. Also, in terms of the timing, it doesn't need the timing for similar reasons. Right? Same as al-jabira. Right? Similar discussion. We don't have timing for the imamah. As long as it's in your head, you can wipe on it. You don't have wudu before it, and you don't have to have timing for it. However, just for you to know that this is the strongest opinion chosen by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayhi, by Ibn Baz, by Ibn Uthaymeen rahmatullah alayhim, a lot of scholars, but it is not the opinion of the majority of scholars. The majority of scholars, they said it is exactly like the khuf. You need to put it on whilst instead of Taharah. And that's why Ibn Uthaymeen rahmatullah alayhi, he said, even though the strongest opinion is that you're not required to have wudu on, but to be in the safe side. To be in the safe side, when you wear the imamah, put it on whilst you are in safe wudu. Are we clear about this?
Yes.
Right? Now I'm going to use the same discussion to move on to ladies and the way they wear their hijab. Similar things will apply. You see what I said earlier about building things one step at a time, and then you get to a point where it's relevant to you, and then you lose track and you don't understand clearly because things are building on like this. The same rulings that are said concerning the imamah about men can also be said concerning the hijab about women. Right? So what do we say? The ruling about wiping over the khimar, there's difference of opinion about it. A lot of scholars are of the opinion that it's not permissible. However, the strongest opinion and the most authentic and reliable opinion is that it is permissible if it causes difficulty for the sister to remove her hijab, right? Then she can wipe over the hijab.
Should be wudu.
Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayhi, he said, the saying of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, يمسح على الخفين والخمار. The Prophet sallam said, wipe over the socks and the khimar. So saying this to men, he's referring to the turbans. The khimar, when he said to men, wipe over your khimar, what he's referring to is how they cover their heads. Men did not wear khimar. Right? But the same thing can be said about women. The same thing can be said about women. If women are wearing something over their heads and it causes difficulty as much as it causes, as much as the imamah causes difficulty for men, then why should two things that are equally the same, why should they be different? You understand? This is where the two things, when there's no difference between them, we can't say the ruling is only applicable to one of them. Right? Let's hold on to that, inshallah. We're running out of time. I don't want to finish it.
But for the strongest opinion for the masah al-khimar, you have to she will have to take wudu or not?
We said the same thing applies. So whatever we said about the imamah applies to the hijab, meaning that the strongest opinion is that she does not need to wear the hijab upon wudu. Right? She can just wipe on it. Right? But the majority of scholars are of the opinion that she needs to have wudu, and there is this time limitations as well. Right? And therefore, to be in the safe side, Ibn Uthaymeen rahmatullah would recommend that women should only use that in times where there's difficulty, and if they can take wudu beforehand, it will be safest. Right? But if the situation calls for it, then it is permissible. Right? Sometimes, especially now the winter is coming, and sometimes the hijab and wiping over the head can be a little bit problematic and difficult for sisters. So you should know that this is the ruling. Adding to that, I would say also the ulama, they said, if the turban or the hijab are covering the ears, right, then you don't have to wipe the ears. But it will become only mustahab. If your hijab or your imamah covers your ear, then you don't have to wipe your ears. The wiping over the imamah or the wiping of the hijab suffices you. But it will be recommended if it's possible and if it doesn't bring hardship. The same thing about the hair concerning men. When you are wearing the imamah, if you are wearing the imamah, for example, and a part of your hair is appearing from the sides or from the front, like the case of the Prophet ﷺ, then it will be mustahab for you to first wipe over the hair that is appearing and then wipe over the imam. Only mustahab, it is not an obligation. It will be perfectly fine if you only wipe over the imam. Right? Final point here is for one to understand that the kufiyya, you know, the kufiyya, or they call it al-qulunsuwa, or al-taqiyya, it is not covered in this ruling. You know, one cannot say that I'm going to wipe over the kufiyya, right? Because there's no hardship in that, right? So you have to remove it and wipe over the socks. This is all that I wanted to share with you today. If you have anything outstanding, anything that is unclear, please do ask.
Yes, the question about the time limit.
Mm-hmm.
After you move the socks,
Mm-hmm.
how long before you can wear the socks again?
How long before
You wear the socks again.
you wear the socks again?
So you still have to
No, I mean when you take off the socks, and then how long is it valid until?
If you take off the socks,
Yes,
you cannot put it on and wipe again.
yes.
You have to take wudu first,
Yes.
and then put on the socks, and then you can wipe over it if you want to.
Okay.
Right? So basically, the removal of the socks, it means that you just cannot put it on and then wipe over it again. Right? One thing I noticed that I missed out on from the previous class, which is, sister, before you go, sister, just for this one point, you know, it is also common among sisters to use very, very extremely short, scanty form of socks that only covers the fingers. Have you seen those sort of, yeah? Like that kind of socks is impermissible because it doesn't cover the top part of the feet, so there's nothing to wipe on, right? But when we say that you don't, the socks doesn't have to be including the ankle, it doesn't have to be covered the ankle, meaning that if it goes a little bit below the ankle, then it's fine. But there has to be something to wipe on, right? Does that make sense? So socks that are thin, socks that are that has holes in them, socks that do not cover the feet up to the ankle, you can wipe on them, right? But those extremely short ones that hardly cover the feet and the toes, that they are impermissible. You cannot use them as something to wipe on, right? Alright, we'll stop here inshallah, jazakumullah khair, and we'll continue next week at the same time, at the same place. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك. Yes, sir.